Introduce myself first. I'm Dr. Peter Bateman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Association of International Schools in Africa. And this is part of a year-long series of webinars that we are running at AISA. And we're very happy to have Gavin McLean with us, McLean, sorry. And Gavin is the International Business Development Director with Edmentum International. And he's going to speak to us about how we might expand educational opportunities with accredited virtual school courses. Some of you might be aware that AISA has a keen interest in blended learning, and we want to support that in our schools wherever possible. And so I'm going to ask, Gavin, you just want to have some opening remarks, perhaps? Just tell people who you are and what you do and what we're going to be speaking about.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I really want to, first of all, say it's a great honor to have the opportunity to present to everyone today. We're very excited about working with AISA schools and also introducing virtual schooling into the schools across Africa. My own personal belief and our belief as a company is that virtual schooling is a potentially very useful extension of what schools can offer. And I'm very interested to tell everyone as much as I can about what we offer and about the overall pedagogy behind that today.
Great. Okay. Abraham, I see you have a question already. Is it something you want to just type into the message box for now? And we'll answer it as we go along. So I guess, Gavin, the first thing would be just to tell us generally about Edmentum International and what is that organization about?
Yes. So we've been as Edmentum, we've been in the K-12 content business for, in fact, nearly 60 years. We started in 1960, so next year is our 60th anniversary. We're probably best known for our American solutions, particularly in high school. We own the Plato courseware business, and any of the participants who've taught in American high schools will know of Plato. It's a very well-established brand in that particular country. We now have a complete array of curriculum solutions for K-12 in the US, and we also own the Education City business in the UK, which is the largest provider of K-6 online solutions for the British curriculum. In fact, it's used now by 14,000 schools across England. In 2015, we bought a company that was one of the earliest businesses into virtual schooling, and we've really been developing that business in the last years. So offering our award-winning course content, but actually employing teachers and providing accreditation and assessments linked to that. So that's probably the longish story. Our international business has only been in existence for a couple of years now, and I have a team dedicated to supporting international schools and introducing our solutions and working with them to make the best possible results from that.
Great. And you're quite widespread around the world, I think, now.
That's right. We're working now in 80 countries. We have a very strong business, as I said, in the US and the UK, but we've built probably primarily with the UK curriculum, the British curriculum. So we have a strong business in the Middle East now. We're into Southeast Asia in quite a big way, but we're really now focusing our development into Africa and South America, where the academy solutions, the virtual school solutions, I think have the greatest potential.
Great. And that leads me to my next question. Can you tell me a little bit about what virtual schooling is?
Well, I mean, in the very simplest terms, I would define a virtual school as a school where the teacher is in a different location to the student. Now, that might seem a very self-evident thing to say, but it's worth stressing and then thinking a little bit about what that means. Because as we all know, those of us, and I'm fortunate to have had a number of years in the classroom myself, that the social interaction in a class in the physical space with students is very important. So the virtual experience, we have to say at the beginning, is different. The interaction between the teacher and the student has a different cadence to it, and there are different requirements to ensure that the learning experience is successful.
And Naila's just asked a question. The programs you run, are they limited to the British curriculum, or whatever curriculum you have?
That's right. So just to be clear, we have the British curriculum for K through 6, which is Education City. We have the complete K-12 and in fact college and career with the American curriculum. We also do provide a lot of resources for schools that have IB and Cambridge International now. IB in particular, I'm not sure how many of the AISA schools are also IB accredited, but we are in fact increasingly being asked to provide resources for IB schools.
Yeah, so there's a number of different curricula are used across our schools. Some are using the US curriculum. They do AP programs.
Yeah.
Some write their own curriculum, which means that they can be sort of supported across the world. Certainly we have IB schools, and certainly we have British national curriculum schools that are using the Cambridge system. So it sounds like you have offerings in all of those.
That's right, and we're adding to these all the time. So, I mean, and we'll talk about this in relation to the Academy, but just one example, which is that we're in discussion with Cambridge to actually offer Academy courses for the Cambridge curriculum. And it would be the first time that Cambridge has actually ever offered accredited virtual courses. So, you know, we're doing that in direct response to demand from some of the Academy schools who are also Cambridge accredited schools.
Great. And Barney has a question. This might be a bit specific, but he's asking, which AP courses do you offer?
Well, we offer a wide range of AP and elective courses. Again, this is an area we're expanding all the time. It's something that we are finding is of very specific demand in virtual schooling. Now, a couple of points on that. I'm sure it's not uncommon in AISA schools, as in other schools, that finding qualified AP teachers is not easy, and finding qualified AP teachers who will also stay for a reasonable period of time is also hard. So in fact, the greatest demand so far that we've had for Academy courses outside the US has actually been for AP courses. So I think there are I won't give you the list, there are 15 courses at the moment, but we're adding to that list all the time. And I would say that the nature of this is, if there is a demand for a course in a particular school, we will find a teacher for that course. That's how we grow, right, in response to what schools need.
Right. And that sort of broader question around that is why do you think virtual schooling now is important to international schools?
I think there are a number of reasons for it. Now, first of all, the question of teachers. Parents are increasingly demanding of schools. They expect the highest quality possible, and they expect the highest standards from teachers. And of course, all schools that I work with would like to provide the best teacher for every subject. But unfortunately, that's not always possible. Now, there are often very specific reasons for that. If I were to take, for example, languages, a case in point, we actually work with the state of Alaska in the US. There is an increasing demand for Russian language in Alaska. Why is that? Because of the melting polar ice cap. Opening up the trade route from Russia to Alaska. But obviously, it's very difficult for Alaska to recruit teachers of Russian. Now, that's a specific case, but if, for example, if I were to take, say, advanced math or computing, again, there just are not many teachers in those specific high-level disciplines around anyway, and in international schools, they are of high value and very difficult to find. So I think the virtual school can offer a consistent high quality option for a school who would like to offer those courses but may not have the teacher. I think the other point is that, of course, employing a teacher for a specific subject requires a certain number of students to take the subject. And that also limits the options of curricula. So, you know, you find a situation where the curriculum range is quite limited because the school can't really justify the salary costs if only, say, 5 or 6 students are interested in the subject. Well, again, in a virtual school, we currently offer over 600 courses on the virtual school program. And I like to describe it as a menu for the school to say, well, look, we would like to be able to offer the widest possible menu to students and parents, of course. And wouldn't it be great, for example, in languages, to be able to offer 10 choices rather than 2 or 3, or indeed for the advanced courses to be able to offer all the advanced courses that might be relevant. So I think those are 2 major factors. But I think another is related to timetabling and also geography. So again, schools are limited by the time that the school is effectively open, but some students may wish to work either earlier or later. And indeed, some students may have to work earlier or later depending on their parents. So for example, if the parents are working away from a city and the family may have to travel with them, that student might miss some schooling if they're not actually in the physical school building. If they're taking a virtual course, they can do that and it can be scheduled as to their time requirements. So there's more flexibility for a school. I also like to describe it that imagine you could offer a school day that was maybe 12 hours long rather than 7 or 8 hours long. So I think there are a lot of advantages potentially for an international school adding virtual schooling to the portfolio of choice.
It's interesting, you and I were chatting briefly beforehand, and I'd mentioned to you that one of the factors in this part of the world is when schools have to close in an emergency. And we've had that happen to a number of our schools. And I was citing to you an example where the school had to close very quickly because of political unrest. And the staff were literally trying to get worksheets put up online at the very last minute, you know, as they were heading out the door. And I would imagine then that having a system in place with an organization like yours would help alleviate some of the stress around that, because it's much easier then for people to move across to an online system, to a virtual school system, even in an emergency.
Exactly. And also, I mean, I should say again at this early stage that we see our virtual school as very much supporting teachers and administrators in physical schools. There's some debate around virtual schooling where it's perhaps presented as an alternative, you know, a pure virtual school, but we very much see the programs working effectively within a conventional school as a support or adjunct to the main program. Now, that's also important because one of the things I think that we see as a great value is that administrators and teachers also learn a lot more about digital teaching and blended pedagogy by working in a conventional classroom environment, but also supporting students taking virtual courses. We often find, for example, that teachers like to take some courses themselves because there's no better way of understanding these types of programs than your own personal experience. So, you know, I'd like to put it forward to the group that this is also an opportunity for professional development in this very important area that we're all going to be living with. You know, we're at a transitional phase at the moment, but for sure, the students that we're seeing now coming through will expect virtual courses because, let's face it, they're learning through YouTube. We all are. You know, I want to fix my car. I'll probably go to YouTube for a video first, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of, I mean, that is in a sense an informal methodology, but it's becoming something expected within the mainstream. So, you know, whilst it might seem a little daunting for teachers to see this somehow coming in as a new thing, I do want to stress that. I do see it not just complementing the mainstream school, but also offering a really valuable professional development opportunity.
Yeah, great. And one of the other things that you and I spoke about briefly was this idea of individualized learning. And Nyosi has a question pertaining to that. She's asking, are students allowed to decide how much time they take to complete a particular course?
Well, the courses, I mean, our courses tend to be allocated in a fairly straightforward manner, in that the student would go in, select the course that they wish, they'll be allocated a teacher. The course would need to be covered over the period. So let's say it's a 36-week course. It'll need to be covered within that period, but there's a great deal of flexibility as to when the synchronous learning takes place. So synchronous meaning the actual face-to-face time with the teacher, and then when the asynchronous learning takes place, and that meaning when the student is either working on online courseware, working on videos or whatever. The other thing to stress, however, is that it's something that we take a great deal of pride in. We like to work with the school to train teachers and support staff to support students with their virtual school learning. So in other words, whilst we give lots of flexibility to the student, we don't want them to be cut adrift or left to their own devices. We want the school to basically support them. And the dashboards for the programs are available to the school administrators and to their regular teachers. So they can see day to day, hour to hour, every interaction that the student has had on the course, so they can track their progress, just to make sure that they're not falling behind. I should say that the course completion rates are over 90% wide. So, you know, that's because there's a lot of support, and it's very important, you know, that is something that we work with schools to embed within their practice.
See, that's remarkably high. As somebody who's worked in the field myself, I know that the retention rates in online courses can be very low. They can be low as 10 or 15%. So to have a 90% retention rate in an online course is quite spectacular. And that means there must be a lot of support. Nyla's asking an interesting, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, just on that, because the other thing just to say is in the US, there are a lot of courses used as part of what we would call intervention strategies. So students who might be in credit recovery, for example, or may have missed class time. So those students sometimes they may not be particularly experienced independent learners. And that's another thing I think that what we've proven since the program started is that by giving those learners a lot of support, they will get there, but also that they actually often enjoy the experience of being given a bit more autonomy to decide when to learn and follow the system, because the system tracks everything they're doing. They can't get lost in it, you know. And I think those learners too, you know, I talked about AP. I don't want you to think that it's for the elites, right? It can actually be very beneficial for students who may need a little bit more support as well.
So kids that are catching up, perhaps.
That's right.
Yeah. So Nyla has a question about the cost, but I think we'll defer that in a minute, because let's hear about the Academy first. And then, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, let's delve into a little more depth as to what the Academy actually is, and then we can find out what it costs.
Sure. So the Academy is effectively a virtual high school. So I mentioned at the top, we own a business called Plato Courseware, and this provides over 400 high school courses, very high quality courses. What we've effectively done is we've added teaching, and we've added a learning management system and an accreditation system to courseware, and that's the Academy. Now, the Academy has been in existence for a number of years in the US. It is unique in that there are several other companies offering virtual high schools, but Academy is the only one that has a high school diploma recognized by the US State Department for international visa application to US universities. Two reasons that this is important. First of all, that it means that the visa applicant would be fast-tracked in terms of their application to college, but really important that student would not also require an English proficiency certificate on top of their diploma. So just to be clear on that, there is no need for the student to provide a TOEFL or IELTS score on top of the diploma. Now, in some parts of the world, that's actually quite a big burden, not just in terms of the additional cost, but also the stress on the student. You know, they've completed their high school and they've also then had to do this English proficiency test. But because of the nature of our academy, that's not required. Now, there's another piece I need to mention, which is very new and very exciting, which is that in July, we bought a company called Calvert Learning. Now, Calvert, some of you who have, again, taught in the US may know Calvert. It's a very revered brand in K through 8, so kinder, elementary, and middle school. And we have actually bought that company to provide the academy right the way through from kindergarten to high school. Now, to be clear on this, that my own personal belief is that the greatest benefit of virtual schooling at the moment is in high school, where students have a degree of maturity and expectation of autonomous learning that they can be very effective. However, there are also many settings where offering academy-style courses to younger learners is appropriate. And now we have Calvert that has that experienced business. So this is very new, and I'll be excited to share with you more about this at the conference in Cape Town in November. But just to mention that now, because that's literally just come about in the last couple of months.
Great. So there's some interesting questions coming in around the challenges. The process, maybe talk about the process of how a student would learn on the academy. You've alluded to it, but clearly there's face-to-face time. Yep. Is that done individually or is it done in groups? And then there's asynchronous time, which is sort of offline learning.
That's right.
And then Stanley's asking, what are the challenges around this? If a school wanted to introduce this, what are the challenges that taking virtual courses in a school might be? And how have you handled those when you've tried to introduce this in schools? That's a great question, Stanley, by the way.
Yeah, no, so in the kind of the bigger picture, as I say, if we think about this kind of menu of courses, so the school would look at that and would decide what they wanted. So if we were saying with the high school programs, over 400 courses across all subjects, across all grades. Now the school often has a very specific need in mind. So if we mention AP, for example, and this is one we've had some very recent experience of, a school where they have demand from students to take AP courses, but they don't have sufficient teachers, or indeed in one case, any teachers. So in that case, we would ask for a number of students and then teachers and administrators in the school, the details there. We would then provide them with an access to the internal system, so the course selection system. The administrators would go in, they would select the courses, allocate the students to those courses, and then we would allocate the teacher to each individual student. Now, in some cases, of course, there might be a number of students within the same school taking the same course. So, for example, let's say there were 10 students doing an AP math course. We would obviously expect to allocate the same teacher to those students, and highly likely would wish to have the same synchronous lesson for that group. But equally, there may be students doing a whole range of different courses, and they might link to students in other countries, or indeed they may get one-to-one tuition, depending on how that's scheduled. The teachers are scheduled across a very long school day. They're not teaching every hour, but there is an offer of time across what would be, you know, around, say, 12-hour period. Select the times that fit, and then that's scheduled in over the length of the course. Now, again, just to be clear, if for any reason a student can't attend a synchronous class, that all the classes are recorded and all the recordings are available to the student, both the students where the classes where they've participated, but if they haven't participated, they're able to watch that recording later. And we find interestingly that a lot of students like to watch previous recordings at different points. So, you know, as either a revision point or indeed preparing to do the next stage in a topic, they might want to review what they've done. The courseware, the content is all delivered through our learning management system. It's available online, offline, it's device agnostic. a laptop computer or other hardware, whether it's a mobile phone or an iPad, again within a school intranet or at home. The courses are of a specific length, whether it's a single semester or 2-semester course, and they all end with some form of assessment, whether it's a credit or whether it's a more formal assessment. All of this is clear within the catalogue. All of this is approved with the school and with the administrators before the courses are begun. And as I said before, every element of the students' interactions are available to the school. Every keystroke, every email, every video, it's all captured and available in a menu system that I think is very, very user-friendly for, because again, from the administration side, remember that not all administrators have a teaching background, but they would like to see that information in a way that they can then report it back. It's also up to the school how much of that information they want to share with the parents, so they can filter out certain information that might be, of course, internal to the school. But again, interestingly, we find that parents, the more parents know about their child's learning, the more they get involved, the more they're proactive, the more they're supportive, particularly with these types of programs, particularly, as I said, at either end of the scale, whether it's the learner who needs more support, who might have missed a class or maybe be struggling with a class, or the student who's moving to those advanced classes. We do find that parent interaction and engagement increases very dramatically in this way. Now, of course, we do like to start reasonably small and then grow. So we always recommend with the school that we maybe select 1 or 2 courses or 1 or 2 grades. We run a fairly small scale program, and so we get everyone trained on this. We'll provide training to administrators, to teachers, to classroom assistants, and we'll also check in as and when required. In the first courses, we'll be checking in every week. It may not be necessary to check in more than monthly after that, but we're always available. Our team of trainers and consultants is always available. And I should say all of our consultants are teachers. They're all former teachers. So there's nobody involved on our side who doesn't understand what the teacher needs.
Great. I mean, Stanley was asking specifically about then, that's the system, that's the way the system runs, right, but we know with systems there are always challenges.
That's right.
Can you describe some of the challenges that a school may face, or a student, a learner may face, if they're trying to adopt the Edmentum Academy?
Yes, I think one of the biggest ones initially is often around scheduling the courses. This is as much a philosophical thing for the school, you know, because if you're always thinking of a class is a certain group of students in a room with a teacher, and suddenly you're adding this element that, well, the teacher can be in another place and the student may not necessarily be in the school, tracking and monitoring that within the school's learning management system, within the school's internal systems, requires some thought and some discussion. We have a lot of experience in the early stages in particular of this, and you know, we would not assume that every school understands how this might work. And this often is about the principal, the school leadership team, senior teachers, working together with us and actually looking at those scheduling points quite carefully. I think also selecting the courses and ensuring that they also fit with the in-class curriculum a student is doing. We've had cases, for example, where with high-achieving students who are pushing towards college entrance, they want to take as many additional courses as they can, right? And of course, in truth, a student could take 10 AP courses through the academy, but we would recommend a student being pushed to that extent. And it's also important that the school keeps a close eye on that, because what we don't want is a student who's doing a full-time classroom curriculum and is also doing 3 or 4 hours additionally. I mean, that's not such an extreme case when you are talking about students who are in themselves highly motivated, but also where parents do push them quite hard. And that's a conversation that needs to be carefully monitored. There's also always the question about available bandwidth and accessibility. And again, we need to work with the school to ensure that, you know, the synchronous classrooms, that works smoothly. We really haven't had any major issues to date, but we're not complacent in this whatsoever. We would always make sure that we checked those issues and we ran some trials to make sure that those things were working. And then I guess one of the biggest ones, which is something that we'll need to work with schools country by country on, is there is no regulatory framework anywhere in the world for virtual schooling. There simply isn't. We work very closely with ISTE, which is the International Society for Technology and Education. The Academy is also the only virtual school approved by ISTE, incidentally. But ISTE are coming up with some really powerful standards for technology and education, particularly in K-12. And if you speak to their research department, they'll tell you that they're asked by ministries of education all the time, what do we do about this? Because we don't know. So for example, it's important to check that there is an equivalency for credits and diplomas that are taken through virtual schooling with a local system. That's not always the case. So for example, if a student were to take the Edmentum Academy and receive a high school diploma, we know that that's a fast track into the US. It's equally a fast track into the UK because there's equivalency for that diploma for UK universities. It's not always the case that that equivalency is taken for granted, right? So that's something, again, school by school, we need to country by country, we need to work on. And I also say that we as a collective should help ministries to become more appraised of this whole area and give them the information to make the decisions as to how to build it out, not just with international schools, but actually also in the local state system. These people are like us. This is a new frontier and they're trying to learn, but they're often not able to access the same tools that we are. We're very fortunate in the international school community to be, you know, at the forefront of this. So we need to help in that area too.
Just to let the folks listening know that AISA has a blended learning program, and not only will Edmentum be at the conference in Cape Town in November, but AISA is also running a couple of blended learning, professional learning deep dives, as well as having our blended learning coordinators meeting. So there is an opportunity there for any of you or any of your colleagues that are coming to Cape Town to learn more about this. And that's, I think, sort of confirming really what you're saying, Gavin. Around those challenges, it's important that schools have a good idea of how this would fit. That does lead me to a question that Barney has. In most of the schools that you're working with, is it the school that you work with, and therefore who pays the fees? Or in some cases, are you working directly with parents and therefore the parents pay the fees? Or do the parents pay the fees to the school? And then how does that work?
Yes, again, it does depend on the business model that the school has locally and indeed how they wish to work. So quite a regular model would be, we'd call it prepay, so that the school would, again, decide on which courses they wanted. They would effectively reallocate those courses on a prepay model. Now, when we say prepay, of course, I understand how schools have to sometimes wait to receive money in from parents and so on. So we would allocate, but we would offer, you know, reasonable credit terms for that. There is often the case where the school will actually build that into the fees that they're offering, particularly at the highest levels. So for example, if we were looking at grades 11 and 12, where the AP is being offered exclusively through Academy, the school is literally just going to build that into the fees for those students, and the parents are more than happy with that. Equally, they're often offered as an extension. So we've got a couple of cases at the moment where the school is effectively advertising these courses to parents, particularly, again, the elite courses, and saying, look, we're going to offer this through the school. We think it's a great idea. It is beyond our core curriculum. This is for students who are looking, for example, to shoot for the American Ivy League universities. We believe they could be very, very beneficial, and there will be an additional cost. And in a sense, there's a marketing discussion there between the school and parents as to how that is done. We do, in some cases, also go to parents, but I should say that we don't really go to parents as individuals in any countries at the moment, apart from in the US, because the US has a very specific homeschool network system, very well established. And whilst these are individual groups of parents or parents, they're going through an established setting. We're not really comfortable with parents who might purchase these courses, and we don't really know how those courses are being used with students. So we'd much rather do it with schools. If we are doing it with that model, we would work with what we might call a learning center. I'm not sure how many of these learning centers exist within the AISA network, but for example, across the Middle East countries, learning centers are often effectively offering after-school clubs, after-school tuition. For example, Sylvan Learning, Kit McGrath, these type of centers. And we have done some deals with those centers to offer academy courses, but the students will actually come to the center to take the course. We believe that's effective. We're careful, I think, to ensure that the setting and implementation of the course is likely to give the best outcome for the student in every case.
Yes, and that leads me to a question David asked around quality control. So as you design the courses, there would be a quality control process, I'm sure, but then also in terms of the implementation, what structures do you have in place? David mentions that in a regular school, heads of department or school administrators would have a process for guaranteeing quality, but in as he calls it, the new ecosystem of a virtual school, who's responsible for that then?
It's a very good question, David. Thank you for asking it. Well, first of all, to say that we employ our teachers, they're on staff, right? Our teachers are all state certified teachers. They also must have an additional qualification in digital teaching. The most common qualification in the US is the INASOL qualification. All of our teachers go through a stringent recruitment process, and they have to have that as a baseline. We evaluate our teachers on every course that they provide, and we would expect the school to do the same. We would expect to have a formal evaluation process at the end of each course where the school gives us feedback on the quality of the course in terms of the content and the teaching and the assessments. And equally, we're able to give the feedback the other way around as to how we feel it has gone, so we can together we can improve the experience for students. It's also very important that I stress the training that we would provide to administrators, heads of department, and school teachers to ensure that everyone involved in the students' learning understands how this will work alongside the rest of the program, and that we continue to refine and evaluate that on an ongoing basis. So, as I said, I will provide in my presentation at the conference a lot of detailed statistics as to how this is working. But in every case, we're looking to work with the school to ensure that these courses are delivered to the highest quality and that they work for the school as well as the students and the parents.
And Naila has a sort of a corollary question that she's wondering, do you enroll teachers from outside the US in as teachers, or Naila, I'm not sure whether you wanted to register yourself as a facilitator or what the question behind the question might be. But for example, if you're looking at time zones, particularly if you're doing the synchronous work, wouldn't it be, particularly for international schools where we have some very, very high quality teachers, and many of them would be involved in blended learning already, would that be a possibility?
It's likely to happen very soon. There are several reasons for that. We've got huge interest in the program across Asia, and obviously the time zones for Asia with the US are really not suitable at all. But equally, there are quite a few cultural considerations in terms of the type of teachers that are appropriate for schools there. So we are looking, we're actively looking at the moment to hire in that region, but we're also looking to set up more best practice hubs, working with associations and with universities in regions where we're starting to build a presence, partly to bring through the talent that exists in schools. And again, you know, one of the things about this is that think of this as a potential interesting thing for a teacher who might want to do a couple of additional hours as a virtual teacher on top of their regular teaching, you know, teaching students in other schools or in other countries. It's potentially of real value in terms of their personal and professional development, but also we're very interested in supporting the research in this area on an ongoing basis, both within our own learning design and research teams, but also with universities and associations to see how we build this better, and also how we, in a sense, capture what we're doing, because this really is the cutting edge of education. And what we're doing over the next few years is something we should capture and we should share with others as they come through. So, no, absolutely, we're very actively looking at this, and also with other curricula, as I mentioned. The conversation with Cambridge is ongoing, but we're also, in fact, meeting with the IB next week at their global conference in Abu Dhabi to discuss the possibility of diploma courses and how we might bring virtual teaching into that, because the same issue applies. You know, IB teachers are also quite hard to find, and particularly at the diploma level, the specialist, the really expert teacher with that depth of knowledge provides so much value to schools and students. So we really do see this as an opportunity, not just for further learning as a group, but also actually for, yeah, professional opportunities for everybody.
Great. And if I can just put a question to the group, maybe you can type your responses in as to how many of you are actually involved in virtual learning at the moment. And if you have programs, maybe you could drop a note in the box there so we get a sense of how many of you are actually doing it already, and whether you actually do teach online with your students already. So, in fact, I had a list of questions here, Gavin, which I think we've sort of more or less covered them. Maybe just to reiterate, one of them here is around the types of students that would benefit from academy courses. You did touch on it. I have a question really around the younger kids, and we've found the same thing, is that students in the lower grade levels, is there a mechanism or is there a particular skill to being able to include them in academy courses? You do have younger age academy courses, yeah. And how do you address that? Because that's been a difficult thing for our schools to be able to do it, particularly if they're out for 3 or 4 weeks where they're trying to catch up or stay involved.
I think it is a major challenge, and I think it's an area that I think requires a lot more work across the board, and that includes the other major companies, that work in this field. First of all, we must understand the developmental stage of a student as a child, as an individual, and the fact that students coming through now are so immersed in technology. The issue is not the technology, absolutely not, right? In fact, the challenge is more for the teachers as to how to keep up with that. But the issue is how to give the student the kind of same socialization experience that they get in class, the interaction with peers, the interaction with parents and with teachers, particularly with students in elementary schools, so much that happens that is non-verbal, that is to do with play, to do with action, to do with movement. How do we capture that? Now, I'll be honest and say I don't think there is an answer to that question at the moment. I think that the courses that are most effective for younger age groups tend to be around areas like revision. That there is a test to be taken. The student may have missed some time or may need some additional support and work in this area. The course in that case could be very helpful and beneficial. But I think it's an area that you know, we will be developing in response to demand. I mean, the homeschool networks I mentioned earlier, I mean, in fact, there's more demand there for elementary than any other level, because the teachers in those settings, they're parents first and foremost, right? They're not specialist teachers. And indeed, many elementary teachers around the world, they're teachers of an age group. They're not specialists in a subject. So I think that these programs can provide a lot of benefit. However, I believe the school has to offer a much higher level of support, engagement and monitoring to ensure that the experience is as beneficial as it is with an older age group, because I think that is a major concern I have.
Yes, and I think, you know, from our point of view as an organisation, and I guess for our participants, to be able to offer professional learning opportunities for those younger age students, so our KG teachers and our elementary school teachers, even up to middle school teachers perhaps, to be able to learn for themselves what's the best strategy to use in terms of teaching online. Interestingly, I think the vast majority of use, particularly in our schools in the AISA region in Africa, will be a blended model. So there will be that face-to-face socialization, but as I say, every now and then something may happen where that's not possible. And hopefully that's temporary, and therefore, if it is an issue, it doesn't stay an issue for long, because the students can gather back together again. So, Gavin, I think we've covered, although we haven't actually asked you all the questions, but I think in our conversation we've covered pretty much everything that I can see there, unless there's something that you feel that we've not touched on yet. Well, there was a question about the costs, and I don't know whether you have a cost model that you can share.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I mean, there is no price list as such, partly because it's very new. I mean, we do have a price list in America for American schools, but I mean, this is a very new program for schools outside the US. We're really only just starting. I won't put a price list together today, but what I will say is that when we come to the conference, we'll be looking to discuss that with schools. And also, I should say that when it comes to that issue of, you know, obviously in the long term, schools may well want to incorporate the cost into fees, but in the short term period of, you know, marketing to parents and so on, we can actually do a lot to support schools with that in terms of the, you know, how to market the courses, providing videos and other things that are helpful. So we'll do a lot in that area. As is always the case, you know, we're really not interested in doing short-term deals with anyone. We're about building long-term partnerships with schools that work and ensuring that the relationship comes first. The cost has to be a cost that the school can bear and that parents find reasonable. So I think I'd say that we always look to come up with a solution that works for schools. Just finally, if I just have a moment to say that we are really interested in learning more about how this blended model will work with schools across the you know, AISA membership. And again, my primary interest in the conference is actually to listen and learn to schools' experience there. So I hope everyone who's attending will take the time to come and speak with me and find out more.
Great. Gavin, well, of course, there's a great opportunity. We have, I think at the moment, it's 28 blended learning coordinators are coming to the conference. And you and I can speak offline about maybe how you can access them during their meeting to be able to speak to them. And then I'm sure they'll come to you as well. I've just posted in the comments box, in the chat box, the international Edmentum site for the Academy, where I guess people can go and get more information.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then they can contact you. Perhaps what you could do.
I'll put my email, shall I?
Yes, you could. Or I think I also have it. So
okay, I'll do it. That's fine.
Yeah. And then, so people can continue that sort of conversation with you directly if they would like to. Certainly, AISA is interested in speaking to you as well about supporting our blended learning program. And again, you and I can talk about that in the future. So if anybody in the room have any other questions or comments you'd like to make, we have just a few minutes left before we have to finish. So please do type them in if you do. Otherwise, Gavin, any last words from your side?
Yeah, I mean, just to say again on that point, we're building out some case studies with schools to share with everybody. I mean, in a sense of that full implementation that we've been discussing, but also to look at the evaluation with schools who've used the program for a few years, so you can see, you know, I gave a couple of statistics, but it's very useful, I think, for schools to see how this is built over a period of time, what the trends have been. But also, in addition, we're very interested in the wider research area, both to participate, collaborate in future research, but also, in fact, to commission research with schools. We've just concluded a project actually with the government in the Middle East, who actually asked us to run a full year evaluation with 3 schools. And that's the type of activity that we are passionately keen to do more of. And again, if AISA is interested in doing some research with us, we'd be delighted to participate.
Great, and we are. And we also have adopted the ISTE standards, so we're a little bit ahead there. So we'd be happy to talk to you about that. And it'll be interesting to see if we can use some of the schools that are involved here tonight, maybe as some case studies as well, to see their pathway towards virtual learning. So it only remains then, I guess, for me to thank you, Gavin, very much. And also to our participants, thanks for hanging in there. Some really great questions. And I do hope some of you are coming down to the conference, but if not, you've got Gavin's contacts there, and you can also go on to the Edmentum International website and have a closer look at the actual programs and products there. So thank you all very much, and I wish you a pleasant evening.
Thank you very much.